Ryan Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630. WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL. We'll get into what happened with Mrs. Brady and the former mayor of New York City a little bit later this morning.
It's a horrible story. It's one of those stories you sort of feel like somebody's sharing a little too much.
I think it's fascinating. And we'll also dive into the Chris Wallace, Michelle Bachmann flake question coming up. Byron York joins us now, chief political correspondent, Washington Examiner. Good morning, Byron.
Good morning, guys.
So we were just, Major Garrett was just in studio from the National Journal. We were talking about Iowa and the poll numbers looking pretty good for Michelle Bachmann and Mitt Romney, not so good for Tim Pawlenty. But I have to ask you, how important is Iowa to the Republican nominee? I mean, Mike Huckabee won it in 2008, and he didn't win. So I'm curious to get your take on how important Iowa is.
And George W. Bush won it, and he did win.
Right.
So it's unclear. It changes from year to year, but we are every 4 years there is a season of Iowa bashing, because there's at least one candidate who looks at Iowa and says, that suit does not fit. I'm going to try to skip Iowa, go to New Hampshire, do something like that. Oftentimes it's a very difficult thing to do. So the fact is that Iowa is the first place that real people come out and vote, and an enormous amount of attention is paid to it, and you ignore Iowa or you skip Iowa at your peril.
Yeah, well, Rudy Giuliani skipped it in 2008, and it certainly didn't help him. But the big boys...
That was the worst campaign that I think anyone's ever run.
Well, that's a good question. Rudy Giuliani or Fred Thompson? Worst campaign ever run. It was a close call.
Very quickly, what Rudy did was he said, Iowa, those are not really my people. Well, New Hampshire, that's Mitt and McCain.
Right.
And
I'm going to wait.
Mitt, and then South Carolina, not my folks. I think I'll go to Florida.
Yeah,
Wrong idea.
Like that'll work.
All right, but the big boys who we believe, and big women who we believe who can win in this particular case, Michelle Bachmann,
must be gender neutral here.
Mitt Romney, Tim Pawlenty, they all are. They're all in Iowa. So they're not saying I'm not going to go to Iowa. So
they absolutely are. And by the way, these numbers from the Des Moines Register poll are better for Bachmann than it's sometimes been reported. Yes, she's virtually tied. Romney's 23, she's 22. If you look at the favorable ratings, her favorable rating in this poll is 65-12.
Wow.
Favorable to unfavorable. Romney, now he's been in a campaign before and you get beaten up a little bit. He's 52-38, which is very good for him, but she is 65-12.
Wow.
Who is her base of support? Is it the Tea Party and
Yeah, it's the Tea Party and social conservatives too. She's obviously she's a tax lawyer. She's been a member of Congress, and she's kind of lived the life. She has 5 children of her own and has fostered. She and her husband have taken into their house. Was it 20?
23.
23, yeah.
But Byron,
an enormous number.
But Byron, does that change if we get Palin or Perry in the race?
Well, the interesting thing about, first of all, I'm out there, so I'll just keep saying it. My personal opinion is that Palin is not going to run, and I say that based on what I've observed, not because
I believe you're right, but
Palin land has whispered anything in my ear. If you had a race in which there was Palin and Bachmann, you might have to think that could be okay for Romney, because Palin and Bachmann would probably appeal to some of the same constituency. Rick Perry, a real wild card, I have no idea.
We have Lanny Davis on a regular basis, former Clinton White House official, obviously a big liberal, and he always says, I hope Michelle Bachmann wins. I don't know if he's playing Jedi mind tricks with us or not, but there seems to be a belief from the left that they would love to have Michelle Bachmann win the nomination and go against Barack Obama. Is there some truth to their wishes?
Well, they want to portray her as crazy. And we've seen that many times. They've said it over and over again. The latest is in a new profile in Rolling Stone magazine, which is just over the top. It's just an almost offensively over the top article. So something about Michelle Bachmann kind of gets under their skin. But I think she would be a formidable candidate. Now, she is not in the lead in New Hampshire. Let's say that. On the other hand, I think her potential in South Carolina is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So she could be a really serious player here.
Byron, elsewhere in the Midwest and Wisconsin, we have the union fight still going on, sort of by proxy now. Right after the union fight, a conservative judge won a Supreme Court seat in Wisconsin and upset, or as some liberals really expected the Liberal to win, as a rebuke to Walker. It didn't happen. And now there's this weird allegation against the conservative justice. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Weird doesn't really describe it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bad blood in the Supreme Court. You're right, the conservative justice has just been reelected, beating down a challenge that the liberals wanted to. If they had won that seat, they'd have a 4-3 majority on the court and could kill any of these budget reforms in court. They'd lost. What happens was a lower court judge had stopped the new law from going into effect. The Supreme Court ruled 4-3 along ideological lines to let it go ahead.
Right.
The day before they release that opinion, June 13th, they have a meeting in one of the judges' chambers. There are 6 of the 7 judges there. And over the weekend, a lefty publication in Wisconsin wrote that David Prosser, the Supreme Court, the conservative judge, quote, allegedly grabbed fellow Justice Ann Walsh Bradley around the neck in an argument in her chambers last week.
And they reported this with 3 anonymous sources.
3 anonymous sources wouldn't go on the record by name. Later, people started talking to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and it came out that there were definitely 2 sides to the story. One, Bradley, the justice here, the liberal justice here, said that Prosser had her in a chokehold. And another witness said, and these witnesses are all Supreme Court justices.
Right.
Good Lord.
You know, another witness said that she had actually charged him and that he had put up his hands in self-defense. So it's an amazing, astonishing story. I mean, it would be amazing if it were in an insurance company office.
Right.
The idea that it's in the Supreme Court chambers is pretty astonishing. But I think clearly going ahead with this story over the weekend, when they didn't have both sides of the story, this is clearly from a liberal outlet. It's in the context of this ongoing fight.
Well, and Think Progress picked it up, surprise, surprise, which leads to MSNBC.
Progress. Yeah, and this is like the continuation of the budget fight by other means.
All right, speaking of the budget fight, the president is now apparently going to get involved directly in these budget talks. What do you make of that, and who besides the president is really running the show for the Democratic Party?
Well, he had to get involved at some time, but he gets involved at a time when there is virtually no ground, I think, for compromise on some of these last issues. And we have these 2 issues. One is a budget has not been passed in more than 2 years, and a budget has to be passed. And the other is the debt ceiling thing, which is the debt ceiling will hit it for sure sometime in early August. Now, you hear all the sides saying, well, we don't want to have this 11th hour perils of Pauline kind of thing where we go up to the last minute because it'll rattle the markets. It'll be a terrible idea. I think that's exactly what you're going to have. I think as August approaches, we still will not have an agreement on this, and there will be these late night 11th hour negotiations.
All right, Byron. Good to talk to you as always. We appreciate you coming on the show.
Great to be here, guys.
Byron York, Chief Political Correspondent, Washington Examiner with the Morning Majority.